Well, hello, Endow ladies. Simone here, Director of Program Growth for Endow, and this is our third and final podcast episode with Noelle Mering. Noelle, welcome back.
Great to be here again.
And Noelle is a fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, author of the book Awake, Not Woke, which we're going to talk about in just a sec, and also the Theology of Home book series and editor of the theologyofhome.com website, which I love. So if you aren't subscribed to it, go check it out. It's awesome. So we have talked about, again, Endow is an apostolate that's dedicated to calling women to study important documents of the Catholic Church, not just for the sake of, reading documents that their official language is in Latin and being fancy about it, but actually because the documents have a prophetic value. They say the voice of the church, the mind of the church is not only formative, but it says something here and now about our lives and the seasons of our life and how God is calling us to respond in this moment that we are living in. So we've talked about the document Familiaris Consortio and why that was so important and transformative in Noelle's life. We've talked about the importance of community as another essential aspect of the Christian experience. And now we want to talk about the fruit, and on this podcast, at least, we talk a lot about personal vocation, right? That personal vocation isn't just reduced to your state in life, which is the circumstances of your life that often a personal vocation takes the form of, but the personal vocation being your unrepeatable being, and the expression of that, which is the most attractive way we bring others closer to God, closer to Jesus, closer to the church. So, I want to ask you, what if you could, in a line or in a sentence or in a short description, what would you say is Noelle's personal vocation?
Oh gosh, well, obviously a wife and mother is first and foremost. Child of God, like everyone's is. I think that maybe something that seems unique to me, not that I'm the only one who feels like this, but maybe something I've always felt a calling to is to try to be some sort of bridge translating the modern secular world to the Catholic world and the Catholic world to the modern secular world.
Yeah, right.
Not in any way that's necessarily so distinctive from what I think other people are doing, and probably many have done far better, but that I do feel that space is something that I'm really interested in. And I do a lot of work kind of thinking about that, how to get those two worlds communicating to each other.
I love that. Yeah, because with wife and mother, that's kind of a state in life vocation, but personal vocation is a broader umbrella vocation. Like within those circumstances, what does it mean for Noelle to be Noelling? And if it's being that bridge, I think that's a beautiful answer to what is your personal vocation. And then I guess my other question to you is, because again, we want to, especially in the context of our 8 to 12 week Endow groups, we want women to have that rich experience of learning a lot, yes, being transformed, informed, yes, of experiencing rich, deep friendships based on rich content, absolutely, but also growing closer to understanding and refining that personal vocation. What does it mean for me to be me, regardless of the circumstances, right? What is it that God has uniquely called me to in this moment in history? So I absolutely love your answer, to be a bridge between the Catholic and the modern world. And we need people who can do that because we are in this very secular, very post-Christian, very hostile to the faith culture. So John Paul II really wanted to encourage women in their personal vocations in this way, in terms of really bringing to light the unique feminine spirit, that what he called the genius of women, the feminine genius. When you first heard of or encountered the documents Mulieris Dignitatum on the dignity and vocation of women, or his letter to his later 1995 more pastoral letter to women, which are the touchstone documents of Endow. Endow was founded by women who accessed these teachings and these writings of John Paul II for the first time and said, hey, we need to make what John Paul II is saying about the uniqueness of women accessible to all women, just in the same way that Pope Paul VI, in his closing message at the end of the Second Vatican Council, said, women of the world, whether believing or not, it's up for you to save the peace of the world. In John Paul II's 1995 letter, he writes, I'm speaking now directly to the heart of every woman. So simply for being a woman, you have this feminine genius, this unique feminine spirit where John Paul II said was vital and essential for the church and the world. When you first encountered that, what was your reaction? What did you think of it?
Well, I mean, it's my mind sort of combined with my first reaction just to the writings of John Paul II in general, which was, I think I was in college and my dad was sort of worried about that I was drifting away from the faith, which I was. And so he started bringing me to conferences, apologetics conferences with, Ron MacArthur and Father Fessio and Ralph McInerney and all these wonderful people in Notre Dame and in Southern California. And I remember one of them talking about, I think it might have been love and responsibility, but I think but the phrase feminine genius came up in the context of that as well. And it all just felt like a different way of thinking about all these things, but one that made such total sense. And, I think particularly with the feminine genius, John Paul II was so, again, prophetic because, what we've seen and are seeing very acutely now with the what is a woman kind of phenomenon is that what is a woman has really been lost, right? And so, Carrie Gress has a new book on this, The End of Woman, that draws this out more in depth, but just the idea that, the answer for the empowerment of women has been, implicitly, how do you lose your womanhood, become more like a man and divest yourself of your fertility? So I think that he drew out that the need that the world had to understand that there are unique gifts and there's a reality of being a woman that is not something that society can lose and disregard easily. And when I had my first baby, I remember my sister called and she said, and I hadn't been someone who was, thinking about having children for years. And, I probably absorbed too much of the feminist mindset to be kind of, thinking too much about motherhood. And when I had my first baby, I remember my sister calling and saying, don't you just love motherhood? And I said, I guess so. I mean, I love her. And then I realized at some point, I do love her, but also I'm now welcomed into kind of this universal experience that all with these women have. I remember being like in the grocery store and seeing women who are 20 years older than me with children and from different cultures and different demographics, whatever. And just thinking like, we get each other. We're all mothers. This is all of a sudden, it felt like this whole world was opened up to me. And it was about my love of my particular child, but it was also a window into the calling of all women, which is to be maternal in some way, be it biological or spiritual, or as a mentor, what have you. So, I think if that's probably a longer answer than you're looking for, but
no, not at all. I mean, it's fun to ask this same question to different women because the reactions, I mean, when I first encountered, I was like, oh my gosh, this is just catering to women. And we don't really need this like participation award. I think as a reaction, I was like, this, again, it was a very superficial understanding of John Paul II. I hadn't read the documents yet, but I was like, oh no, another thing about women, because we're important too. Like, I don't need you to tell me this, Holy Father, but so it's interesting. And now I'm like, oh gosh, like you said, this is absurdly prophetic and so needed. And I think every week I have a conversation with a woman that impresses in my mind how much the Holy Father was really on to the Holy Spirit and really did understand, like, we must protect women's dignity and encourage them to be the fullness of themselves, or we really are lost, as families are lost without mom, and like you said, even biological motherhood is of course ordered to spiritual motherhood as the end of the telos of biological motherhood. So one aspect of your personal vocation is, of course, this book that you've written, Awake Not Woke. So before we say goodbye today, I'd love for you to discuss what inspired it, what's it about, who should read it, and why it's important.
Sure. Yeah. I've been writing about the woke movement and just for various publications for a couple of years. And then I came up with that title and reached out to my editor at TAN and had a contract the next day.
It's a great title. It's a great title, Noelle.
It's simple and clear. A couple weeks later, the quarantine started. All my kids came home, and then the summer of writing, and so it was a really bizarre experience to be writing about something and seeing in some ways some implications of this ideology kind of playing out around the world. But it was born out of an effort, I think, to kind of I've always had this allergy to the feeling of being manipulated, and it just has felt like there's been a manipulation through an appeals to love and compassion, but then the outcome of the policies that are demanded for the sake of those good things oftentimes tend to be so harmful, I think, and harmful to the very people they're often trying to help. And so the movement was just interesting to me on that way. When I started researching it more and more, I realized that it was far more than a political matter. It was a deeply spiritual battle, and that that it was going to lead us into really dark places, I think, if we don't kind of identify what was happening and sort of look at it in that framework. I think it's easy to sort of dismiss politics as something that's too controversial or something that's going to cause rifts amongst friends and communities. And, that's certainly true. But I think part of the reason for that is because the political world has become usurped, I think, our spiritual world in so many ways. And
Yep.
so, and I think that's, in some ways part of the nature of an ideology, that it sort of the political life kind of absorbs your inner life.
Yep.
And so then that became something really interesting for me to explore. So what I do in the book is I go through the origins, and then I go through what I think are the three main dogmas of the movement, the way it operates and sort of indoctrinates, and then a path to restoration.
Yeah, I love that. And I appreciate what you said about, again, the organic nature of this book emerging from your personal vocation, in the sense of you're the sort of person that doesn't like to be manipulated. And it's a very manipulative ideology. And all political issues, so to speak, are at its root spiritual issues. And if we don't have a robust spiritual culture, then politics will become our God, and it has. And we need to be very aware of that. And even the tendency within practicing Christians to exert emotional energy, I feel like I say this every other day, more into politics than into the real power, which is in the spiritual life and in building a strong culture. So thank you. We'll link that book up, and your other ways we can contact and access you, Noelle, and all the amazing things that you're doing for the church and the world in the show notes. And any final thoughts before we say goodbye today? And thank you again for being with us here at Endow.
Yeah, no, it's so great to finally connect with you. And I love what I'm seeing Endow doing. And it seems, in so many ways, in concert with what Carrie and Emily and I are doing with Theology of Home, and just that idea of changing the culture in these different but equally important ways. And it's so glad to be connected.
Thank you so much, Noelle. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.